Hello again. I received a couple of emails recently in which I was asked if it is true that I said that child abuse can be funny. I don't know, but can guess easily enough where this idea has its origins. It relates to a video which I made in which I read out a passage from a book by the great English humorist and broadcaster Arthur Marshall, who for some years was on the television programme Call My Bluff. Here is a passage from a book of his published in 1974. It's often regarded as being his best book. This passage is about his time as a pupil at a boarding school. Remember that Arthur Marshall was a very funny man. Practically everything he wrote was amusing. Preparatory schools at that time seemed each to have its quota of unmarried masters who were still looking about for Miss Right. Although it was difficult for them to marry on their miserable salaries, that was not, for all of them, the problem. Some of them were by nature looking about for Miss Right rather less vigorously than others. Dedicated paedophiles stalked the linoleum-covered corridors and, sensing a non-frosty reception, pounced. No boy who wasn't actually repellent could consider himself safe from an amorous mauling among the rows of pendant Macintoshes. The purpose of these ungainly gymnastics was lost on the more naive boys. They referred to the odd activities as romping, a verb which has since caught up with them. But I, an odious and knowing little giggling plumpness, was well aware of what was toward, and realised that the merest show of cooperation would lead, sooner or later, in God's good time, somehow, somewhere, to a sticky tribute. Bullseyes, for instance. So, in answer to the question, can the abuse of children ever be funny? The answer here must be yes, for this is a funny account of such a thing. In fact, child abuse and the sexual interest of adults in children has been a recurring source of humour in this country since at least Victorian times, right up till the 1980s and 1990s. Let me give a few examples over the last 50 years or so from popular culture. In 1969, a mainstream British film called Lola was produced. It was a comedy. It had what might justly be called an all-star cast. Among those who appeared in the film were Honor Blackman, Jimmy Tarbuck, Charles Bronson, Susan George, Jack Hawkins, Robert Morley, Lionel Jeffries, even Trevor Howard, famous for his starring role in Brief Encounter, was in it. The film was directed by Richard Donner, who went on to direct Superman and Lethal Weapon. Some idea of the plot of Lola may be gleaned by simply looking at one of the posters which advertised it. This may be seen in the thumbnail to this video. It shows a schoolgirl in uniform and wearing white knee socks, together with a harassed-looking middle-aged man. The caption reads, "She's almost 16, he's almost 40. It may be love, but it's definitely exhausting." Just let that sink in. This film is about a middle-aged pornographer's seduction and sexual relationship with a 15-year-old schoolgirl. It is supposedly a romantic comedy. The whole thing is played for laughs, and not one of those who produced, directed or acted in it apparently saw anything the least distasteful about the subject matter. Just imagine a poster advertising a film like that today. The title of the film, incidentally, is a conscious reference to that most famous exploration of the mind of a predatory paedophile, Vladimir Nabokov's Lolita. The central character in the film, played by Charles Bronson, alludes to Lolita when he admits to being a nymph fetishist and calls his schoolgirl lover Lola in tribute to this inspiration. The song at the beginning of Lola, written and sung by Jim Dale, begins, "Never met a girl like this for me, dumb but pretty like a schoolgirl should be." As I say, it's a comedy, and it was very popular in this country. When this film was made, the sexual abuse of children was thought to be funny. Let me give a couple more examples. James Bolam, who is still, of course, acting, and Rodney Bewes starred as the central characters of the situation comedy Whatever Happened to the Likely Lads, which was broadcast in 1973 and 1974, at a time when they were in their late 30s. As with the film Lola, this was not the product of some sleazy Soho studio, but was rather one of the most popular sitcoms on television at that time. It was written by Dick Clement and Ian Lefrene, the people who gave us Porridge, Lovejoy and Auf Wiedersehen, Pet. In the episode Boys' Night In, broadcast on the 27th of March 1973, Terry and Bob, played respectively by James Boland and Rodney Bewes, talk about their favourite sexual fantasies. Terry says that, "Sometimes I'm the new master at the girls' high school." Bob understands this perfectly, replying, "Yes, gym slips. I've been worried about that. I think the sexiest TV programme is Top of the Form, not Top of the Pops." The quiz programme Top of the Form featured teams of school children aged between 11 and 16. The fact that a man approaching 40 could describe the sight of underage girls as being sexy in this way and raise laugh from the audience tells us that this was regarded generally as pretty funny at that time. As late as 1986, a major British film was produced featuring a subplot involving sexual activity between a schoolgirl and a teacher, presented in a light-hearted and supposedly amusing fashion. Clockwise, starring John Cleese, Penelope Wilton and Alison Steadman, was essentially a comedy road movie in which Cleese and a schoolgirl attempt to reach an important conference in time for him to give a speech. In the course of the journey, the girl reveals that she is having an affair with a married teacher, but this is played for laughs. The teacher himself is shown to be a bumbling comic character, and we are invited to accept this dreadful business as being a bit of harmless fun. The truth is, sexual activity between adults and underage children has always been a staple of British humour, and it's only in recent years that we've begun to find something shocking and distasteful about the whole business. I do not myself view it in this light, you understand, but the fact is that child sexual abuse has not only been seen in the past as not too serious a matter, it has sometimes been seen as amusing. And I must confess to finding that passage in Arthur Marshall's book amusing in a kind of grim way.